fields. And for more on that, I have two guests with me here in our studio. We have Shabana Bhatia. She's the chairperson and editorial director at Hindustan Times Group. And we also have Javed Ashraf. He is the High Commissioner of India to Singapore. Welcome. All right, Mrs. Bhatia, maybe we can start with you that the Hindustan Times Group is hosting the HT Mint Asia Leadership Summit tomorrow in Singapore. And I understand that this summit has always been held in India, and this is the first time it's being held in Singapore. Why Singapore?
That's right. Actually, if I can just go back a little bit, that HT has a financial product called Mint, and we decided to launch Mint at an international destination. And 5 years ago, Mint overseas was launched in Singapore. Since then, Mint has been organizing smaller conferences in Singapore, basically around economy and trade-related issues. So we wanted to take the Hindustan Times Summit International, and with that, the natural fit was Singapore, where we already had a presence. We launched Mint Singapore 5 years ago, and also because of the large community in Singapore, whether it's, the venture capitalists or investments, large amount of those come from Singapore. Also, as far as India is concerned, for a lot of the MNC companies, their regional headquarters are Singapore. So those decisions are also made. So Singapore was a very good fit as far as Mint was concerned. To add to that, we've always enjoyed, very good cultural and social ties with Singapore, which made Singapore the perfect place to kind of expand our footprint, both in terms of the product. So we launched Mint Asia 5 years ago. And now when we decided that the Leadership Summit has completed 15 years in India, it's done extremely well. But we felt in the changing global order, it was important to kind of get a reflection of Asia, as opposed to just trying to, focus on India. And with that in mind, we wanted a regional destination outside of India. Singapore, obviously, for us was the best fit because of the strong ties, the cultural links, the fact that even geostrategically, we felt that, of course, the larger ASEAN as well, but India and Singapore can drive prospects in trade and security-related issues. So we felt Singapore would be the right destination to try and see how best we can slowly enlarge the scope of the summit. At the moment, the summit is focused primarily on India, both the one in India and the one which we are having tomorrow, which is a little more regional in terms of its scope. But we hope in the coming years to try and enlarge this and to try and make it truly reflective of the region and not just India. So using our expertise in being able to organize this, we thought we would now try and expand the scope. And Singapore therefore became the most appropriate destination for us to come to. Sure.
Mr. Ashraf, you are the High Commissioner. How would you describe the current state of relations between India and Singapore?
Well, first of all, I think, let me say how excited we are that HT Leadership Summit is coming to Singapore. It is just one more example of how India's presence, India's engagement with Singapore, not just at the level of government, but outside the government as well, is growing. We have, of course, very strong economic, security and diplomatic relations, but this adds another intellectual dimension to India-Singapore relations. The platform has actually been a wonderful, vibrant platform for conversation between India and the rest of the world, especially as India has been globalizing. So bringing it here to Singapore, from my perspective, reflects a national commitment to the region, to our Act East policy. So we're very supportive of this initiative. As I think our relations are very special. India-Singapore relations are special, in some ways unique. We are two countries connected by histories. We have the envelope of familiarity and comfort that comes with cultural ties, historical connections, people-to-people ties, a very vibrant diaspora here, part of a great, magnificent diversity of Singapore. And on top of that, I think we have a extremely strong public sentiment in both countries, very positive. We have a political goodwill of the highest order, no irritants in our relationship. We deeply value our economic partnership. I think there's great complementarity between Singapore's strengths as well as India's rapidly transforming economy, which is taking place on an unprecedented scale. The reverse flow is also very strong. I mean, India, this is the leading destination for Indian investments. This is also, India is the third largest source of tourism from here, growing at about 16 to 18% a year. Most Indian companies look to Singapore's financial market to raise their bonds. So there is an overall, in every area of our development priorities, we're very strong partners. But very few people realize how strong our defense and security relations are. This is the longest uninterrupted naval exercise that we conduct with any country. And this has been 25 years since then. And our international partnership is, again, very, very important to both of us. It reflects what I call a convergent views and values and vision, a belief and commitment to rules-based international order, belief in democratic values, in relationship between countries, sovereign equality of nations, respect for nations, whether they are small or large, and you know, observance of generally peace, open commons. All of these things bring us together to try and build an inclusive, balanced, and open architecture in the region, particularly at a time when this region is in flux. Mm-hmm. And I'd also say that, you know, Singapore's been really, in some sense, the intellectual bridge between India and ASEAN, starting in 1992. This year, we hosted all 10 ASEAN leaders in India as chief guests for our Republic Day, unprecedented in itself, and for a commemorative summit to celebrate 25 years of partnership. And we did recall the role that Singapore played in bringing ASEAN and India together, and it remains today a very important springboard and gateway to the East.
And I'm sure this summit will just further improve relations between not just Singapore, for ASEAN countries as well. Mrs. Bhatia, maybe you could just summarize for us some of the key speakers that will be speaking at this summit, and what are their main talking points in the panel of discussion?
So we have quite a diversity in terms of the speakers that we've actually put together for the summit. The inauguration is by the Deputy Prime Minister, so we are very privileged and honored because he's been very receptive right from the stage. When we thought of the summit, we got a lot of encouragement. We have with us the Chief Minister of Andhra Pradesh, Chandrababu Naidu, and as you know that the capital city there is being done with the help of Singapore, Amravati. So that's very relevant in the sense of the growing relationship and the ties that we have between both the countries. We have with us the chairman of Tata Sons, who again have a lot of investment in Singapore and investment from Singapore. We have some sessions on entrepreneurship within the region. So we have people from Singtel and other local companies. We have leaders basically from all fields. So we have Mr. Nitin Gadkari from India, Union Cabinet Minister. We have Tony Blair, because the summit should not limit itself to just issues pertaining to India, but as I just said, taking a step back, larger leadership roles, because you know, you can have different countries, but leadership is common. And therefore, as the name denotes, the Leadership Summit, we try and get leaders who people and the world can emulate, cutting across different fields. So whether it's from the field of sports, we have a leading sports player in Sachin Tendulkar, whether it's creative arts, so to, you know, the bridge in the cultural side, to industry leader, to the Tata Sons chairman, to our ministers, to examining, you know, India and Singapore's role in the whole region. So we have a whole diversity of topics, and we've got leaders from various fields coming and actually addressing the summit.
May I add to that? Of course, as you might know, that Prime Minister is, of course, Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi has sent a message for the Hindustan Times Leadership Summit, which will be read out tomorrow, and it just shows the importance that you know, Prime Minister at the highest level attaches to this initiative that Hindustan Times has taken. Who knows, if it grows in due course, we could invite him in person. And also the actor from the cinema world is Amir Khan, who, as you know, has had 2 record-breaking films, even in China, Secret Superstar and Dangal. So we're quite very excited to have him here too.
And speaking of Mr. Narendra Modi, Mr. Ashraf, I understand that New Delhi played host to Southeast Asian leaders back in January to mark 25 years of ASEAN-India relations. What are the key areas of mutual concern? We're talking now as a regional and not just India and Singapore.
No, it's a very good question. As I said, that when we hosted all 10 ASEAN leaders in Delhi as chief guests or guests of honor for our Republic Day, which we normally invite one foreign leader. This was to signal to India and to the world the importance that we attach to our relations with ASEAN. It was also the commemorative summit, but this special gesture was to highlight the importance in our vision that ASEAN plays in advancing peace and prosperity in the wider Asia Indo-Pacific region, as we call it now. We strongly believe that ASEAN unity, ASEAN centrality, and ASEAN leadership will be critical to building a peaceful and a prosperous future for this region. For us, at the institutional level, we have 30 dialogue mechanisms with ASEAN as an institution. With each of the 10 ASEAN countries, we have strong and rapidly growing bilateral relations encompassing every aspect of international engagement, from economic to security. And we believe that when we work with ASEAN in broader regional institutions, East Asia Summit or ARF or ADMM+, we work literally from the same page, that we both look at how we can advance greater integration, greater cooperation, and greater stability and peace in the region. Particularly at a time when, as all of us know, this region is in a state of flux. There is a great deal of shifts taking place, a degree of uncertainty, a lot of historical questions, unsettled questions, disputes that are still prevailing. So how do we work together to navigate through this to a peaceful 21st century? This is the reason why, and I think Prime Minister, having been to many of these East Asia regional summits, is very strongly of the view that ASEAN must take the lead in bringing this region together, as it is in bringing RCEP and East Asia Summit to the table.
All right, we'll look forward to attending the summit this weekend. Thank you, Mrs. Bhatia and Mr. Ashraf.
Pleasure to be here.
I've been speaking there in the studio with Shabana Bhatia. She is the chairperson and editorial director at Hindustan Times Group, as well as Javed Ashraf, the High Commissioner of India to Singapore.